everybody. So we are back here with Game of Thrones House of the Dragon. My name is James, go by James the Third on all social media platforms. And unfortunately, Ender is not able to be with us the last couple episodes of House of the Dragon, so we tapped in someone from the bullpen here. We've got Jason, aka Fire the Cannon, with a 1 in the fire, and he is the host of our newly added podcast, the 614 and Beyond, kind of covering all of Ohio sports and my beloved Blue Jackets, of course, who can't seem to get a win. Jason, thank you so much for joining us. We're excited to have you. Definitely filling in and stepping in for these last 2 episodes. And, I was super thankful to find out you were into the show as much as we are. But I'd love for you to kind of introduce yourself, tell our audience kind of what you're about and what you do besides just filling into for this podcast.
All right. Well, thanks for having me, first of all. Again, I am Jason, a.k.a. Fire the Cannon. I do host the 614 and Beyond podcast here in Columbus, Ohio. And, we talk about local sports. We, in the past, we've talked about pretty much anything, related to the 614 is our area code. I'll go ahead and throw that out there now. So the 614 is our area code in Columbus. People are probably listening like, what is he talking about? What's 614? And funny thing is, we actually just split zip codes too. We have a different zip code. We have a second zip code here in Columbus now. So it's kind of weird. So that's kind of where the and beyond came from. So we talk about stuff Columbus, but we also talk about kind of outside of the city and in Ohio and, talk about that kind of stuff. So I'm Blue Jacket fan through and through, as you can see by the hoodie. I got my customized Fire the Cannon hat on. So that's pretty much what I'm about. Sports all the time, and try to watch as much TV as possible when I can. I got a 12-year-old, so it's kind of tough.
Yeah, I get it. I got a 2.5-year-old, so it doesn't get easy.
Oh, that's even worse.
So I guess let's go ahead and jump right into it. We'll try to make Ender proud. This is his baby here, but Season 1, Episode 9, this is called The Green Council. And, of course, it's going to go into kind of the small council and stuff. But as the episode opens up, we get this, scene of this young kid, right? He's running through, as you said, we talked about this a little bit before we started recording, the Red Keep. And, Jason, kind of walk us through on what you're getting out of this scene.
Well, when it started, I like the whole quiet, was there a piano playing, kind of sad piano music, and everything was empty. The throne room, they showed the small council room, and it was, I immediately kind of knew where they were going because of the ending of the previous episode, right? I was assuming it was just kind of like a dark day, dark night, with the
exactly
with the king leaving. So so we see the boy running out of the room, and he's tearing through the halls of the keep, and see him blazing past different, I think 1 or 2 handmaidens, and then looked like he ended up in maybe the kitchen or so. And then he runs up and he tugs on the little lady's dress or coat or whatever she's wearing there, and starts whispering in her ear. And that's my first thought was, again, of course he's telling him that the king died. And then she had that kind of shocked look on her face. So it was that part kind of.
Yeah,
I wouldn't take me by surprise or anything like that. I guess I kind of knew what was going on.
What was going on? Yeah, I mean, as you kind of alluded to, this kid's probably part of the whole whisper, chain. What do they call them? A spider, I think is what they call them. The little spiders. And he runs up to the handmaiden of the queen, which is Talia. I think it's Talia or Talia, and of course, we learned at the end of last episode that she is basically part of that network with what they call the White Worm, which was the whore of Daemon at the beginning of this whole thing. Now she's kind of running the background scene of King's Landing, and she kind of knows all the ins and outs of everything. So obviously, we assume they're going to get tipped off about this. Now Talia goes, she does her duty. She goes straight to the queen's chambers, gets the queen up, lets her know what's going on. And she's kind of, the queen starts sobbing. She's kind of just in shock because she left the king thinking he was just going to sleep as had been going on. And, we as an audience got to see him kind of take his last breaths. And it immediately cuts to this little back and forth where she's talking to her father, the hand of the king, and she's letting him know that he's dead. And then she says to him, with his dying breath, I know this sounds crazy, but he wants Aegon to be king. Now, Jason, I know you weren't on the last episode with Ender and I, but we kind of broke down where it was very obvious that the king, at the end of the episode, he thinks he's talking to Rhaenyra because he's talking about the dream, he's talking about the dagger, and when he says Aegon and he says you're meant to be prince, a lot of other people have been breaking this down. A lot of bigger official podcasts have been in Screen Crush have broke down where Aegon talks about the prince with Targaryens and the old language, Valyrian prince doesn't necessarily mean male. It could be male or female. So the king basically is saying, you are the prince that's going to unite. The king thinks that Rhaenyra is what Aegon was dreaming about, and it's okay that she's a female. But of course, Alicent is sitting on the side where the king doesn't have an eye. So he doesn't. It's very convenient. So from Alicent's point of view, she definitely is conflicted now because she thinks that the king, who was proven that she truly did love the king, she really did care about him. She for the most part is a good person. That she believes this is actually what her husband, the king, wanted. And she's trying to tell her father, and he's trying to help her devise kind of a plan on what we're going to do now because this is going on. Now, of course, we're having this back and forth where Talia is in another room lighting candles, which we can only assume she's relaying to the White Worm, to basically her boss, that the king has died. You got to imagine this is some sort of signal at this point. Do you have anything to add on this little part here before we jump into the council meeting?
No, I mean, did he even have lips though? It's sorry, I said.
No, it's true.
No, you're right. I've read other people think that maybe he was just delirious from the milk of the poppy, and you're right. He was on she was on the bad side of him. He could really see. So I think there was a couple different things going into that where he thought he was talking to Rhaenyra and the whole thing. So yeah, I think it's that part definitely kind of threw me off a little bit. I'm like, wait a minute, hold on, is he delirious right now? Is he and then of course 20 seconds later he's gone. So yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. Now, of course, here we've talked about these. It jumps right into the council room, the small council room, and you see one of those marbles get rolled across the table, and of course the Lannister, he grabs it. It's kind of funny. We've kind of always wondered what these marbles were, and as the first 2 or 3 episodes went along, you kind of realize that basically it's kind of like Lord of the Flies. You have to have the conch or something to be speaking, and to even sit at the table, you've got to have one of these marbles, and you put it in your little bowl. Right. So he gets there, and he just thinks, he makes a big joke out of it. He's like, well, what are we doing here in the middle of the night? Why are we here? The queen looks just completely saddened, heartbroken, scared, kind of all the same. Of course, it cuts away, and you've got her father, the Hand of the King, is off to her side, and Sir Criston Cole is off to the other side. And, they basically say, Otto says the king is dead, and the Lannister guy just looks dumbfounded, like, excuse me, what?
I'm sorry, what?
Yeah. Now, a lot of stuff happens in this episode. Of course, this episode is very traditional, old school Game of Thrones. A lot of talking, but a lot of information kind of goes on. Jason, I'm going to turn it over to you to kind of let you break down this scene and your thoughts as you're watching this and what you think is going on. I know some thoughts I'm going to jump in and add here a little bit, but what are you thinking as we get to this small council here?
Yeah, it was like you said, it in the middle of the night, and everybody's wondering what's going on, and the look on the queen's face. I mean, it just I was actually like, I mean, she looked physically distraught, by the whole thing, and I think she truly was. She truly, after all these years, I think she was still definitely, in love with the king or whatnot. But
yeah,
yeah. I mean, and then when Otto kind of tells everybody, it was Otto, kind of tells everybody that Viserys the Peaceful is gone, and everybody just kind of they're like, what?
Yeah. I mean, it's
uh,
like they knew he was gonna die. They just the way he passed peacefully,
yeah,
it seems weird. But I do like how Otto says, "Oh, but he left us a gift," because of course Otto has always had his own agenda, and he says,
yeah,
"With his last breath, he impressed upon the queen his final wish for Aegon to be his. The succession is going to go to Aegon. He's going to be the king." And of course, the queen still looks defeated. But the rest of the room, what kind of sense do you get out of this, Jason? Is this just Otto that's involved? I mean, there's a lot that goes on right here, right?
yeah. I think as the next couple minutes went on, you could tell it was kind of like typical kind of Game of Thrones again. Like always somebody's always looking for the better way. They're always conspiring and stuff like that, and then come to find out that's what it actually was. And Allison and was it Beesbury, Lord Beesbury?
Mm.
Um, they were the only ones that seemed to be unaware that the rest of the council were ready to handle their what would they say their long lead plans, or they handle the secession plans. But
Yeah, they
yeah,
basically behind the queen's back that they had everyone gone along with Rhaenyra taking over a succession. The rest of the small council had already planned to put Aegon in charge, regardless of
exactly.
what anything was, no matter what the king's final wishes were. Regardless that now of course the poor Alicent truly thinks the king wants this. She's still under the pretense that this is
Yeah,
what he wants, and she's kind of now getting angry, of course, that everyone was planning this.
sure. Yeah, and Beesbury got super offended and called for the plans to put Aegon on the throne instead of Rhaenyra, theft and treason, and uh,
And that went well,
how
didn't it?
oh yeah, of course
Jason,
it
if you
did.
want to, why don't you walk us through this? What happens with him here?
Well, so obviously he goes on his little rant about how he's how do you put it, 6 and 70 years old. Was that mean 676 maybe
Yeah,
in
I
in that
get
talk?
the
So
way he says it. Yeah,
um, yeah, and it's not he just kind of took it too far, suggesting that the king was fine at dinner, and that maybe somebody had taken him out essentially,
yeah.
and now it's regicide now. So um, Sir Kristen kind of crept up behind him when he wasn't looking, and kind of sat him down a little too hard, and I believe just kind of cracked his skull on his own orb.
Yeah,
So
he put
that was
he put his head into the marble, which I thought was super iconic. As much as Ender and I have kind of bounced back and forth, and it's kind of like again, I'm like Kristen Cole, man. Within 5 episodes, this guy went to one of my favorite characters to just a complete like, bro.
yeah.
She used you. You got laid by the princess.
Hmm.
Bro, grow up. Now, Jason, I know you haven't had the pleasure of listening to everything, but one of Ender's rules in Game of Thrones is when you are being questioned, do not give more information than to just simply answer the question. And he has preached this over and over and over. And of course, we get to that part where Kristen Cole admits to sleeping with the princess, but the time the queen wasn't even asking that. She just assumed it was Daemon the whole time.
Right.
And but since then, of course, the queen saved Kristen Cole, and he always does things where he's like says he's defending her, and supposedly this is what he thinks he's doing here. Now, of course, the uh the lord, the commander of the King's Watch, goes over and he's super upset. He basically tells Kristen to put down his blade, and it basically takes the queen, right, to convince him
Right.
to do that. Now, from here, I find it interesting that they're kind of going back and forth on who's in charge and why we're getting this way and why we have to have this. Now, one thing I found it interesting is a few of the council members said, well, we should probably remove Lord Beesbury as we continue this. And Otto shuts it down, doesn't he?
You know what? I'm gonna go back just a second.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can we talk about the no shocked reactions that Kristen just pummeled this guy into the table, and everybody just sat there like, well, that was cool. Let's
Do you
all
think
right.
there's?
Well,
I
what's
mean,
next?
you got to imagine that they're sitting there out of fear too, right?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, because you have I mean, I guess Kristen could probably wipe out the whole table in a matter of seconds, right? If he really
Yeah.
wanted to. So,
Hmm.
and he didn't even use a sword. He just basically pounded his head into the table and um, kind of showed how strong those little orbs were. So,
Yeah, but then I find it interesting that Otto says no, we will keep the door locked and we
right.
will sit here until we come to an agreement. Um,
Yeah.
and then I found it interesting because what's the next thing Otto basically says that really throws the queen off? He starts talking
Uh,
about Rhaenyra.
oh, right. So it sounded like he's basically just trying to, he wants to take out the whole family essentially. At least that's what I got out of it. I mean, he basically said it without saying it, right?
Yeah,
Basically take out the king's daughter and the whole family and the brother and or uh, his brother, her uncle. Um, and then when Allison said she'll never bend the knee, that's when it was. She said, "Oh, you plan to kill him,"
yeah,
and so it was just like, okay, well, fly off, and he told Commander Westerling or ordered him to take off the Dragonstone and
and take care of him.
make it clean and quiet, and everyone, and that's when the Lord Commander basically said, "No, I only serve the king, and there's no king here, so we're not going to do that."
Yeah, I find it very interesting. He basically rips off his cloak and he says, I am here to serve the king," which makes me wonder. So no matter who, whether it's Rhaenyra, whether it's Aegon, at this point I'm thinking, okay, does that mean he's Lord Commander? When there's a king, he'll come back. I'm not, but
That's what he made it sound like. That's what he made it sound like.
yeah, um, it's like his allegiance was just to whoever's king, and there is no king right now. So these people making a decision are just having their own. Everyone has their own agenda.
Yeah.
Um, so I find it super interesting that but again you can see that the queen this entire time, and as this episode progresses, doesn't want she wants her son to be king because from our point of view she wants her son to be king because she thinks that the king Viserys really wants that, and all
Right.
this is from a misunderstanding because the king thought he was talking to Rhaenyra because
Hmm.
Alicent has no idea about this dagger and this tradition that's getting passed on,
Right.
and she doesn't want to kill Rhaenyra. She doesn't want to hurt Rhaenyra. She wants her friend back. And I think as this episode goes on, you're going to see this struggle time and time again. Now, of course, we go into the next scene. We go into Aegon's chambers because they go to look for Aegon, his wife slash sister.
Yeah.
Obviously, they're Targaryen, so this gets very incestual.
Come
Um,
on.
she says, basically, where is Aegon? And she's like, I don't know. And the queen tries to console her daughter, and you know, she never really wants anything from her mom. And then, of course, Aemond walks in, and he basically, uh, kind of tries to console his mother, and he's got this look of like, screw Aegon, for the most part. And I don't know, just all of a sudden this attitude of like he could care less about his brother, which it seemed like a big. I know they didn't get along, but it's a quick change where just on the last episode with the dinner conflict and everything, they seem to be on the same side, and now it's just like he doesn't want his brother to even be there because I think he wants to be the one that is king.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, he later on, I guess later on in the show, I mean, he kind of made that known to him anyway, to Aegon.
Yeah,
So yeah, yeah. That scene with Helena, it was kind of, I don't know. I thought the whole scene was kind of creepy. If you ask me, it
yeah,
was just some weird. Like she's almost like a I don't know what you want to call her. She's obviously weird. She
yeah.
kind of
She's like Bran, where
hates her mom.
yeah, she clearly has visions of the future. She talked about um, the Aemon losing his eye. He would have to lose his eye, and of course that came to fruition. Now,
Mhm.
something here, she goes to talk about your father, And she's talking about the king dying. And Helena immediately cuts her off and says, "There is a beast beneath the boards." And at the time, you have to assume, okay, that must be something that happens in the future, but obviously we don't know what they're talking about. And we'll get to that as we go on a little bit. But straight from here, we cut down to Otto goes up to Sir Eric, and he says, "Where's Aegon?" And he goes, He's basically like, I don't freaking know, bro.
Yeah, I don't
Like
know.
he just does his thing. And Otto's like, "But you're sworn to protect him." And Eric just says, "Well, his exploits evade me." Now,
Right.
Otto, of course, basically tells him to take off his cloak, dress down, get into the town. You've got to find him. And it's interesting here, and you don't really understand why Otto's being so secretive. He says, "Take no one else but your brother." So the two of them are going off into town, and we'll see this back and forth here in a little bit, and why Otto's doing this. But immediately from there, after that quick little insert, we get Rhaenys, Princess Rhaenys, the queen that never was, realizes that she's locked into her room. She sees all this kind of hustle and bustle going on. She's yelling for the guard. No one wants to help her. And then again, this is another scene. It's all that music you talked about in the opening sequence. It cuts over to the queen, and it cuts over. You see Laris kind of lurking around, but nothing's really being said. Then it cuts to the queen, and a very similar sequence of what just happened with Otto. Sir Kristen Cole walks into her chambers, right? And she starts talking about Eric knowing, and that Otto is looking for Aegon. So she decides that she needs Aemon and Cole to dress down and go into the city and look for Aegon as well. So now you've got two different people. You've got the queen and then the hand of the king sending out two separate parties to look for Aegon. Now, why do you think they're doing this separately and not together, Jason? What's your take on this?
Oh man. At first, I obviously I thought it. Obviously I think she knows her dad is kind of slimy. I think at this point, right?
Yeah.
I think mostly I think she's known that the whole time, forever. But especially when she found out that her dad was working kind of behind her back to install her son the whole time. I think that's when it all kind of. I think that's when she said, "Okay, it's time to I need to find my son before someone else does."
Yeah.
So I don't know whether she thought that they were gonna you know take him and I don't know what they were gonna do with him. That kind of, like I said, that part kind of made me. I was like, what? Why are we? I don't know. Why are we doing that? But I mean, both outcomes, right? Like she wants her son to be the king, and they want her son to be the king.
But
And
they
you
have
two
very
different,
different agendas. And it's
right? Yeah,
clear, of course, we all know Aegon. He's very impressionable, and he's basically he doesn't even really want to be king anyways. But whoever gets to him first is going to be able to impress what they want him to do.
they want out of him, right?
They
Right.
want out of him because
How they want him
obviously,
to be the king. Yeah.
yeah, because obviously once he becomes king, they don't really, you kind of lose your power that both sides have right now, right? Otto and the queen have a lot of power right now because not very many people know the king is dead. They can kind of put their impression upon Aegon and how they want him to rule before he takes over. So, of course, we see this, and Cole and Aemon, they're going to go out. They're going to go look. And the first place you see Cole and Aemon, they start knocking on this door because they assume it's some sort of brothel or something, right? You assume. And this starts the first sequence of dialogue where Aemon really starts to open up to Cole about, screw this. Like, why are we even looking? What are your thoughts on kind of what Aemon's going with here?
Yeah, I think it almost like once because they kind of went down that road with the or the street, and you can kind of tell what before they even got to the door where they were at when you see the girl standing against the wall, and all you see is like the leg and the foot or whatnot, and you just kind of can tell, like, oh, they're going down to Paradise City there. But yeah, so yeah, and then when you kind of walking down to the door, and he talks about on his 13th birthday, I think he said that
Yeah.
he took him to a brothel, and that kind of was like, oh, okay, yeah. So he was kind of, it's almost like he didn't like the fact that, I don't know. That's what I got out of it. Anyways, I was like, yeah, he was trying to corrupt me at a young age.
Yeah.
So and then when they finally get somebody to answer the door, they pound on the door or whatnot, and lady comes to the door, and she basically says that Aegon hasn't been there in a long, long time, and so I don't. Then she also said that what she say, his tastes are known to be less discriminating, I guess.
Yes. Yeah.
Which, all right, I get it.
It starts to make you wonder, okay, where is he? If it's
Exactly.
worse than this place.
Right. Yeah. So if he hasn't been there in a long time, and he has less discriminating taste, where the hell is he?
Yeah, exactly. And of
So
course, we see Eric and his brother also asking a few people. So you start to get this back and forth of, you see Eric and his brother looking for Aegon, and you see Cole and Aemon looking for Aegon. So you start to get this back and forth. But of course, now we cut back to the Iron Throne, and you've got Otto basically tells everyone, you once bend the knee and swore your allegiance to Rhaenyra, and now the king wants Aegon to be the king, so we basically expect you to swear your allegiance for your house and bend the knee now to prove your allegiance. And Jason, kind of walk us through this from your point of view. What do you see kind of happening in here? What was your thinking?
yeah, the first thing that really caught my eye is that when he's talking to the group of lords, and telling them that Viserys kind of basically changed his mind about who he wanted to be succeed him when he died, from Rhaenyra to Aegon. A few dropped immediately, right? So when I see that, I'm thinking, okay, well, obviously these people are gonna, they're gonna do whatever they need to do to, stay on the good side of the
Yeah,
crown, essentially. Um, and then obviously you're gonna have a few that aren't having it. So, and I know one lord says he has to, what was it? He had to consult his house, but Otto stops him basically immediately, saying that nobody's leaving the room without declaring their intention. That immediately made me think about the council when he said, no, the door stays locked until we figure out what's going on here.
exactly. Yeah.
So yeah, you could see he's just kind of a bad dude, essentially. And he's obviously power hungry. He always wants to be that person there. But yeah, so he said nobody's leaving the room without declaring essentially their intentions to either kneel or not kneel. So and then what someone says, I am no oath breaker, I think is what it
Yeah,
said.
yeah, they're basically keeping their allegiance, what they swore to.
Yep, yep. And then the woman says her house keeps its oath to Rhaenyra and is not changing that. So first thing I thought of was, well, all right, let's see some heads roll.
Yeah. But
That's what
they did it just this point, they did just escort them out. But then you
right.
see there is one lord that is hesitant, right? He seems
Yep.
very hesitant, like he wants to keep his oath, but he decides to kneel at the last minute, and then they kind of say the long live the king. But who's up there creeping and watching from afar again? You see Laris up there on the balcony overseeing. Of course, right? You're just kind of like, and he sees, it's almost like, I mean, I don't know what Otto and everyone else was looking at, but it's almost like they didn't notice that this guy was hesitant. But of course, Laris does. And Laris starts, you got to imagine, okay, Laris must think something up. But we cut away from there. We're right back into the city. You've got everyone looking for Prince Aegon still, who's supposed to be king. It cuts back and forth, and where does it take us? I would love for you to kind of jump in here, tell me your opinion on this ridiculousness of what we're being introduced here.
I assume you're talking about Eric and Eric flying around the town there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so obviously they're running around with it almost looks like they were like current, like they were from the night from the the 20s here with their man buns and everything else. But but yeah, so they're running around trying to find Aegon, and there was a young lady that was following them essentially, and they ended up. It was basically like a bull ring, right? Like almost like a cockfighting ring.
Yeah.
And at first, I'm like, okay, they're just have a bunch of kids fighting each other, and then you see that like their teeth are filed down, and I'm like, what is going on here? I'm like, this is kind of weird. But then they're obviously peasant children, essentially, and instead of chickens, right, or roosters, however you want
Yeah.
to call it. And there's the little blonde kid in the corner. That's who looks like he was essentially one of the Targaryens, honestly.
Yeah. So you got to assume at this point. I mean, I know that the brothers, they say one of Aegon's, and basically you learn that these are at least one, if not multiple, could be bastard children of Prince Aegon.
Absolutely. I mean, the kid in the corner, essentially, the kid that was sitting down. I mean, he looked like he was plucked right out of the Targaryen house. So
Yeah. And these kids, obviously, it's almost like they're fighting to the death or
mhm.
to their life, and even these guys, they say, I bet that's probably one of many of Aegon's bastard children. And like you
Right.
said, someone had been following them around. You start to see them keep following around. But before we get to that, again, this episode kind of jumps all over the place. It's very slow and methodical, but a lot of stuff starts happening. Now, the Lord that I can't remember his name right now, but that was hesitant to bend the knee, you start seeing him walking through the keep, and he's basically, you assume he's trying to leave. And at first I was kind of like, well, I assume he is just going to go back and, prepare his house for backing Aegon. And you see him kind of walk towards a horse, but then before we get anywhere, it cuts away. So we don't really know what's going to happen. And we go straight back to Aemon and Cole, and they start arguing, like we kind of alluded to earlier, about how Aemon is like, no, I should be next in line to the throne. If they come looking for me, I intend to be found. And Cole is basically trying to tell him he knows what it's like to kind of be in the shadows. And of course, we knew that a little bit about Cole as this series goes on. And then it cuts back to the keep where this lord is on his horse. They're opening the gates. He's about to leave. And you hear Eric talking about the again, this is all over the place. So it's going from Cole and Aemond to Eric and his brother to this lord trying to leave. And they're basically all swearing this oath. Aemond doesn't think his brother's fit to be king. Sir Eric doesn't think his brother's fit to be king, and he's like, he's not fit to be king. Or he said, Sir Eric doesn't think Aegon's fit to be king, and he's the one that swore to protect him, and he doesn't think he's fit to be king. I mean, this Aegon character is a joke, right? I mean, one episode he's like jerking off outside of a window.
Oh my goodness.
The next one, his mom is paying off a handmaiden and giving her this, morning after tea to prevent a pregnancy, and pays her off even though clearly her son just raped her. And all this is going on kind of all at the same time. And as the Lord's about to leave, it cuts back. You finally see the woman that has been following Eric and his brother. She says, for a price, I can take you to Prince Aegon. And she basically mentions her mistress. She doesn't want to meet with servants, but she'll meet with them. She says basically, she doesn't really understand the hand of the king. She says, "You trust him, but if you want to see Aegon, come with me, and I will take you to my mistress, and we'll figure it out." Cuts right back to the keep. The gate is completely about to open. He's on his horse. He's about to ride out, and at the last second, the king's guard stops him, and he's brought in to Otto. And this guy basically calls out the fact that he assumes that Larys is in charge of this. And Larys is there. They're talking. They're talking about his allegiance. And he's basically like, I bent the knee. But he's trying to say, I don't have any love for the princess. But Otto and Larys are like, okay, then why are you trying to leave in such a hurry? Where are you going? And what happens with him here, Jason?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's I guess in this type of in Game of Thrones, what happens to the same, the people who who don't follow the rules, essentially. It was this part kind of, like you said before, it was kind of jumping around a lot.
Yeah.
And I had to actually stop and kind of go back a couple times because it was kind of bouncing and back and forth. But yeah, it was this part, like I said, it kind of threw me off a little bit. So I'll if you don't mind, I'll throw it back over to you for this one.
Of course.
I had to, like I said, I had to rewind it 3 or 4 times because it was bouncing back and forth a lot.
It bounces a lot, yeah. And like I said, it is a lot of information. Even though it's slow, it feels like it's just a lot of talking. It's a lot of stuff going on. Now, of course, as they escort this lord out, you can only imagine what may or may not be happening to him. They basically call his bullshit for all intents and purposes, saying, yeah, we don't believe that you're just going home to your house. You're trying to leave so urgently. Larys is basically pointing out to Otto that, yeah, this guy's going to go alert Rhaenyra, which is what they don't want to happen. They don't want Rhaenyra to know her father has passed. They're trying to get Aegon king before word gets out of King's Landing at all about the king. So they've got to move really, really quickly. All this is being done within a day. Now, you see, as soon as he gets escorted out, Larys is there with Otto. Otto points out and calls him out how he notices that you've spent many of hours with his daughter, the queen. And Larys, we already know he's kind of a snake, and he will do whatever he can. I mean, geez, this guy killed his own father and brother to be in charge of his own house, right? Like, he had that done. And of course, right now you got to assume the only one that truly knows that is the queen. Right. And the way he did it was he made it seem like she wanted him to do it, even though that's not necessarily what she meant. So basically, Larys throws it back to Otto and says, well, all those hours I put in with your daughter, the queen, could also benefit you. And of course, it cuts away. We see the queen talking as Viserys is being wrapped, you assume at this point, for burning, right? Because he's a Targaryen. Sure. The Valerians get returned to the sea. The Targaryens get burned by the dragons. So you got to assume something like that's coming. The queen is just bawling her eyes out,
She's
super
distraught. Absolutely.
Yeah, super upset. And you see this just, I mean, the actress that plays Queen Alicent is absolutely phenomenal. The first one that they had was phenomenal. This one is just as phenomenal. I think she does great, and this just kind of really makes you feel for her. Because again, as a viewer, we know that this whole thing and her whole decision to back her son and is not out of spite towards Rhaenyra, which is what it was trending to the previous 2 or 3 episodes. This is out of, like, she truly believes, again, that this is what the king, dying breath, this is what he wanted. And she doesn't know about this Targaryen legacy and the dagger and the dream and all that craziness. Now, of course, from here, Alicent finally goes and visits Princess Rhaenys, the queen that never was. Jason, I'll let you walk us through this scene here as they have their little back and forth and kind of what they're going on with.
Yeah, so obviously Alicent went and seen her, and she was obviously upset. and she, what's the first thing she wants? She's trying to seek support
Yeah.
from obviously, because they had backed they backed it for Rhaenyra, right? So um, they're just obviously we knew the kingdom is like super sexist, right?
Yeah,
So the
absolutely.
best thing best thing you can do is kind of steer all the men toward peace. And so I think you know kind of going back to what we said earlier, the first one to get to Aegon was going to be the one who kind of led him down a which path, right? So the good path, or the way I read it was a good path or the bad path. And I
Yeah.
think she wanted to get Rhaenys in there because she was, she's a pretty peaceful, seems like a pretty peaceful woman to me anyway. Um, but she doesn't think it's, Rhaenys doesn't think it's very peaceful to be held prisoner either,
No,
away
not at
from
all.
she's doesn't have her dragon, right? So keeping the dragon away and out of everything really made Rhaenyra more likely to negotiate instead of attacking, right? So I'm kind of going back to Rhaenyra when she
Yeah.
finds out that um,
Yeah, because because if Rhaenys sides with Alicent,
right,
and of course now Alicent offered her to have Driftmark. You can have it. You can pass it on to your
right,
granddaughters.
yeah,
Everyone knows. Everyone knows that Rhaenyra's kids are not your blood. Let's just cut the bullshit. We're talking plainly. Everyone
right,
knows. So you'll be able to pass it on to your granddaughters, whoever whoever you want. You'll be able to keep Driftmark in your bloodline. And like you said, she basically says, and without Rhaenyra's use of you and your dragon, and then you got to imagine her granddaughter and their dragons, that
mhm,
basically leaves only two dragons. That leaves Rhaenyra's dragon and Daemon's dragon. So if they only have two dragons, Alicent basically says maybe they're more likely to, yield and give up this succession, and we can do this peacefully. And again, we see this side of Allison is really trying to think of every way to keep this from these people from basically going and killing Rhaenyra. She doesn't want to kill
mhm,
Rhaenyra.
right,
But again, she's stuck on this loop of she thinks this is what her husband wanted. Now, I found it interesting because Rhaenys basically calls her out and says, "You are much wiser than I ever thought you to be." Which basically, and she kind of says it with a smirk, and you start thinking like, "Wow, she thought the queen was an idiot." And
mhm,
I love that she just doesn't call her the queen. She says, "You are wiser than you were." And she calls her out, and then she calls her by her name. She says, "Alicent Hightower." And so you get this. You're seeing the lines divided even farther: the greens versus the blacks. The blacks of the Targaryens, the greens of the Hightowers. Even though Aegon and them they're Targaryens, the you know Rhaenys isn't stupid. She understands this is a Hightower versus Targaryen, and at the end of the day, you got to remember Rhaenys might be married to Valerian, but she is Targaryen. And she basically calls out the queen and says, "You want to stay in your prison. You just want to build a window for it. You yield to all these men." And then she kind of calls her out and says, "Have you never imagined yourself on the Iron Throne?"
sure,
And Allison just kind of has this like fearful look. It's like maybe I don't think she necessarily wants the power. What were your thoughts there?
yeah. I couldn't tell if, like you said, maybe she didn't, come to, hey, maybe I don't want this, or if it was like her mind was blown, and think, oh well, maybe I do want this. So I didn't know which way, I didn't know which way she was going to go with that when she said that. But yeah, when she said that, I immediately, I didn't know if maybe she thought because obviously Rhaenys, the queen that never was or whatever, um, you know, that's all she's thought about, right? For it's since she got passed over
Yeah.
essentially,
Mhm.
and so I thought maybe that was have you never imagined yourself on the Iron Throne? Like, hey, I have. Have you? And then like I said, I couldn't tell if maybe her mind was like she was which way she was going with that. Like, no, I don't want it, or hey, maybe I do want it. So and then after that is where that's where I wondered where they were going to go with that particular information that they just gave.
Yeah. So then we cut over to we see Otto talking to the White Worm, which for those still trying to follow along here is for all intents and purposes, just remember it's the same woman that was the whore to Damon at the start of this whole season. And she's meeting with Otto basically to negotiate agreeing to tell Otto where Aegon is. And Otto's kind of like, oh, you're White Worm, because Otto remembers her. You got to imagine at this point his shocked reaction of her being in charge of the Whispers and the whole Spider Network. He remembers her from being Damon's supposed betrothed, and she was supposedly pregnant and all that. He was there on that bridge where he went to Dragonstone and was gonna fight with Damon, which would have been horrible because he doesn't have a dragon. But it's all she really wants. She's upset that the cloaks the Kingsguard doesn't protect these kids that are forced to fight. She wants control over that. She wants promise of, betterment for the people. And she says that, they basically accept bribes to look the other way. And then she tells, for all intents and purposes, she's going to tell Otto where Aegon is. But she wants Otto to remember that when you get Aegon, remember that I'm the one that told you where he is, and I could have killed him. I think, she says, so when he's king, remember it was me that put him there. And all I could think about was, you think about all the times on Game of Thrones where people had a lot of power, but as soon as they relinquished their leverage, their power was gone.
Mm-hmm.
So she's asking for all this power because she does have leverage right now. But once they get Aegon, I was like, they have dragons and they have I was like, this can't be ideal situation. Of course, Otto has to just say, he just has to agree. Did you have any other way to look on this? I mean, I know she even says at one point, I could have killed him as easily as a wasp on a fruit. And I was like, wow. I mean, you're basically threatening the king to be.
Yeah, it was. I don't know that it. I think didn't she offer? Didn't she give him she said something about the abuse of children, right? In Flea Bomb.
Yeah, yeah, and because those kids that were fighting, she was upset that no one was helping stop that they would take bribes to get rid of it.
She says she'll find him, but only if they put an end to the abuse, of the children in Flea Bottom.
Yeah,
where they're forced to fight. So yeah, and he obviously promises to look into it, but in my opinion, he had no. There's no.
He's just saying what he has to say to get Aegon.
To get Aegon back, yeah. So that whole as soon as they started, as soon as she started kind of putting that stuff out there, my first thought was, no, he's not. He don't care about all that. He just wants. He just wants Aegon back. So.
Yeah. So then we cut to Eric and his brother. They're walking through this area, and you've got this, I guess prayer area of lighting of the candles and all that. And they hear coughing, and they're looking for Aegon, but they don't see him. But they hear the coughing. He's basically stuffed in there. And they pull him out. He's asking for the White Worm. Then he's asking for his mother, and they basically are trying to tell him, your dad's dead.
Right.
And people are looking for you. You're going to be king, and he doesn't want it, right? He doesn't want it at all. He's basically trying to run away from these guys. He has no desire to have any of this. And then what happens next? They take him outside. They're basically going to take him back to Otto, right? And to the keep. So what happens from here?
Well, good old Cole and Aemond happened to be there at the same time.
Convenient, right?
Yeah, so Eric and Eric, kind of, then you got Eric and, sorry, it weirds me out. Eric and Eric and their twins. It's the weirdest thing, right? It's kind of slick though. I like it. But obviously, Eric and Kristen kind of get into a little sword fight, which I thought honestly was probably one of the weakest sword fights I've ever seen in Game of Thrones, the Game of Thrones House of the Dragon.
Yeah, especially knowing Cole's abilities.
Exactly. He could have, he probably could have just slice him down with one shot. But I did think it was a pretty weak fight, to be honest. So they sword fight each other on on those stairs or whatnot, and kind of Eric hangs back. I think he's at the top of the stairs maybe, and then while all that's going on, Amon is wrestling with his brother on the ground, and who obviously asks, "Hey, is my dad really dead?" He says, "Yes, and they're going to make you the king." And he sounded very essentially pissed off about it. There was a lot of distaste there. And then Aegon spits on him, which I thought, oh boy, he's about to get, he's going to get punched in the face pretty good.
Mhm.
So after that, obviously they kind of swap back, and Cole disarms Eric, knocks the sword out of his hand or whatnot, and then they go back, and Aegon's pleading with his brother that he's no ruler and they should find a ship and go away together. And Aemon doesn't respond, and Cole's there to kind of fend off the twins there, and one of the twins, and then he goes there and tells the brother that, hey, the queen awaits, so let's get out of here.
Yeah.
And then it kind of after that is when you see the other brother at the top of the stairs just kind of turn around, and he just made a beeline out of there, which
Yeah.
I thought was kind of weird. He didn't jump in and help his brother.
Yeah, he you start to wonder what he's thinking. Because obviously you've got two sides both looking for Aegon, and like you said, they both want Aegon to be king. They just have different reasons for wanting to get to him first. Now, the very next scene, I found it interesting. This is the first time we see a little bit of conflict here between the queen and her father, the Hand of the King. We go right into the chambers, and basically Otto comes right out and says it, like, well played, you did good. And she's like, this is not a game. And he's like, but yeah, you are playing the game. And Otto is confused because he's like, he knows we used to be on the same team, and I feel like we're not on the same team. And Allison's basically like, I don't understand what you're doing. Like, she looks at this like, from her point of view, again, I keep saying this, but Viserys wanted Aegon to be king. That's the only reason she's doing it. She truly believes that's what her husband wanted with his dying breath. But Otto's playing this game, and he wants to eliminate Daemon. He wants to eliminate Rhaenyra. Like, he wants them killed. And Alicent doesn't want to play that game. She just wants to make Aegon king. She wants to be able to talk to Rhaenyra. She wants to be able to work it out and explain what her father wanted. And you got to imagine from Alicent's point of view, she truly believes if she could have this conversation that Rhaenyra would understand. But what's interesting as a viewer, we're all like, if you tell Rhaenyra what her father said as he was dying, Rhaenyra is going to be able to say, okay, he wasn't talking about your son, Aegon. Let me show you the dagger and let me explain to you. You got to imagine that's going through everybody's head, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, she's trying to. I mean, obviously, Allison's trying to avoid war, and having her people essentially wiped out. Again, we talk about the dragons and stuff like that. So, going back just a second though, but Otto, I thought it was with Otto. He tried to give her the whole ends justify the means speech there.
Yes.
And then she basically she's reluctant to murder people. And that she doesn't think that it's a sign of weakness, that she doesn't want to murder everyone that stands in her way, or that doesn't want to conform essentially. So and I do feel like she's maybe felt like she's like if it's I don't know, chess, she's been a game piece essentially, and she's been moving around all of her life.
Yeah.
How she married Sarah's essentially, right? So,
yeah.
So I think, I just think she wants to avoid war with Rhaenyra at all costs, and they go back a long way. And so, I think you're right. That maybe she just wants to, hey, if I can sit down and talk, maybe we can avoid all this craziness.
Yeah. No. I mean, it's funny. What are your everyone listens to the show. They know Ender's thoughts on Otto. What are your thoughts? I would love to hear your thoughts just on Otto as a character and in general. You like him? You hate him?
Well, yeah. I mean, he's obviously. I mean, he's been kind of a slimy slimy guy from the very beginning. I thought he comes across as like just a quiet, nice man that's getting older and just kind of moving on or whatnot.
Mhm.
But that's obviously he wants power, as much power as he can get, and he'll do anything essentially to get that power. Um, and it all started with moving essentially his daughter into the being the queen
I mean, he pimped out his own daughter.
exactly, yeah, exactly what he did. Yeah, so but no, I think he's slime. I think he's slime. I don't know. It again.
Ender hates him. Ender loses his mind. He's like, because Ender has a daughter, and every time that Otto acts like this, his father's side comes in, right? And he's like, "Are you kidding me? Like, this guy is the worst."
Yeah, he's not. I don't. Yeah, he's definitely not a good dude.
So we cut to the next scene, and of course, we've got to have our very classic, some sort of sexual scene, right? In every episode of a Game of Thrones series. HBO.
Wow.
There are just some scenes that stand out, right? Like, you got to imagine the Game of Thrones, the breastfeeding scene with like what seemed to be like a 15-year-old was creepy. There's a number of other scenes. There's been a couple of weird ones. This season as well, there's been a couple of weird ones, but I think this scene is going to stand out to me as the creepiest scene, right? I mean, it has to. Like, this just really solidifies this character. So of course we cut to the queen's chamber. She goes back, and you can see she just looks like a woman that is like over it, right? She just wants a moment to herself. Like, let me just decompress. Let me have some peace and quiet. Let me just have some wine and just like stop thinking for 5 minutes and have quiet. But of course, as she's starting to get ready, we hear "Your Grace," and we can see that it's Laris, and she just takes this big sigh, like, "Are you effing kidding me? Like, bro, I do not want to talk to you." Now, of course, he reluctantly says, "I have some information that I thought you should know." He goes to sit down in the chair. She decides to sit across from him. And of course, she immediately kind of pulls up her dress a little bit, puts her feet up on the stand, takes her shoes off. It kind of goes back and forth. Laris says, "I have some things that might interest you." And he basically, what I found funny is he just left Otto saying that I can help you. Now she decides to tell the queen about the spider network and that her father basically knows that everything's existence, but he leaves it in place because he uses it. And she has, sometimes I just think, like, have you opened your eyes at all in the kingdom to notice anything? So he basically calls out the fact that this is there. And as this is going on, of course, Allison eventually takes off her shoes. She's starting to rub her feet. And Laris eventually tells Allison that Talia, her handmaiden, is the main spy in the Red Keep. She relays everything in this spider network, and that her father knows. So it's like, I guess, would you say he's trying to pit them against each other right now?
Yeah, I definitely. That's what I think. I think he's trying to break up the. I don't know if we call them a family, but yeah, it's pit. Father and daughter against one another, and I guess he'll go with whichever one wins. Essentially, that's what I got from it anyway. Just kind of, you have two, and hey, I'm telling you this and telling you that, and then whoever wins, I'm there with you.
All right, Jason, I'm going to give you the uncomfortable funness here. So what happens? You don't have to go into full detail. You can kind of allude to it, but what happens is we start to see Allison is starting to think about all this. She's rubbing her feet. What is going on here?
So I don't know why, but when she sat there and she took her shoes off, first of all, I thought that was kind of weird.
Yeah.
Just because it just, I don't know, with the times or what, I don't know. I just thought it was weird. And then when she takes her socks off, I'm like, okay. I don't know why, but I couldn't pay any attention to what was going on. I was just, and I'm not,
because the way it's not like it's subtle in the background. The camera is focused on her feet, right?
It's right on her feet.
Yeah.
And then when she kind of moved, like she, adjusted her body to kind of, I don't know, she was facing him. She moved away from him. And when she put her feet up and just kind of exposed her feet and her legs, and then you kind of see, what he decides he's doing in the background.
Yeah, he
And
decides to play a little pocket pool.
he's playing, yeah. He's got a foot. Laris has a foot fetish.
Yeah,
Um,
but
I
he fully goes for it.
Yeah, I mean, he's gone all for it, and I'm thinking, what the hell I mean, this is Game of Thrones, so typical fashion, right? And I'm like, nothing. It pains me that stuff doesn't bother me in the show anymore, and I think that came from Game of Thrones, where you have just massive amounts of incest and stuff like that. And you're just, I don't know, I don't want to say cold to it, but in terms of the show, I am.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm thinking she's doing this obviously to get what she wants, right? She knows, and the whole time she's like closing her eyes, like, "Oh my God, what am I hearing?" So I think it's good. Hey, he's telling you, "Hey, I'm giving you what you want. If you give me what I want,"
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. When he mentioned to her in past episodes that what he wants, I definitely did not think it was a foot fetish. I thought it'd be more power, but apparently this is what he gets off to. But okay, so we're gonna speed up pretty quickly here because a lot of stuff happens in the last 15 minutes of this episode. So we kind of pan away. We see Aegon having some sort of gravy meal or something. It looks like he's trying to sober up. And then it cuts to Princess Rhaenys, and the other Eric finally walks in. Basically says, "I can't stand for this treachery. I need to get you out of here. We need to escape." She says, "I can't escape." Yada yada. He says, "No, come with me." So he kind of wraps her up. Now, what I found interesting here, they walk through this room where you see the Lord that we saw before. He's been hung. So for treason. So that's interesting. But immediately this room looks familiar, and that's because for those that watch Game of Thrones, this is the map room that Cersei makes, where she draws the big map of Westeros all on the floor, and that. So that's why that room looks familiar to a lot of people. So they escape through that, and she immediately says to Eric, "I need to go to the dragon pits to get my dragon," and he says, "No, that's where they'll look for you. We're going to go out through Blackwater, so we're going to escape." Now, as they're leaving, they're going through the town. It's the next morning, of course, and they run into like a crowd, right? And everyone's kind of getting ushered. And they go down one path, and people are being ushered towards them. They go down another path, people are being ushered towards them. Then they're kind of all stuck in the middle. You realize that the King's Guard is basically getting all of King's Landing ushered. They're herding everyone to some place. We're not exactly sure. You hear the bells start tolling. You see the Queen is with her son Aegon in the King's chariot, I guess is what you call it there. And they're going through the city. And this is finally the time that you realize why Alicent wanted to get to Aegon first, right? So they have a conversation in this carriage. You want to break this down real quick on kind of what this conversation is about?
Yeah. So it looked like he was really, I don't know, what do you want to call him? Just worn out, despondent, whatever. Complains, he was talking about how his dad never wanted him to be king, and Alicent said obviously that's not true. He changed his mind, and he thinks his father never liked him, which was, yes, is what it was. But he laughs at one point. I thought it was funny when Alicent suggests that the king used his dying breath to choose him, and he kind of laughed like,
Yeah.
"No, it's not. No." But then they kind of pan the camera down in between the two, and she opens up the little box, and that's the family dagger. And I think he knew that's when it was, I guess, serious business, and it was,
Yeah.
his whole kind of mood kind of changed. And then she asked him not to rule with cruelty, and I thought, yep, that's exactly, yep, that's why she wanted.
That's why she wanted to get to him first, right?
Yep, because obviously her dad is not, he's kind of, like I said before, he's kind of a slimy guy. So yeah, you get to him, and taken down the wrong path, and God knows what happens.
Yeah.
So
Well, she even tells him, she point blank says, your grandfather is going to want you to kill Rhaenyra, and you must not do this.
right, yeah,
And what I find interesting about giving him the dagger, of course, we know as audience members that that dagger has a secret message on it. They don't know that. Queen Alicent doesn't know there's a message on there. And of course, Aegon doesn't know this either. So here, this dagger is finally getting passed down to someone that doesn't know the purpose of the dagger or the meaning of the dagger. They have no idea this is on there. But she impresses upon him that the council because of his grandfather, the council is going to insist on this, and that you must reject it, and that we can't rule, like you said, we can't rule with cruelty. And I thought it was interesting because what's the last thing? Do you remember the last thing that Aegon asked his mother?
if she loves him, right? Was it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
He wants to know if she loves him.
And you see this like genuine, she basically says, you imbecile, and she smiles with a smirk.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
you see this like genuine mother-son bonding moment. And I thought that was interesting. Now, of course, it cuts out of the carriage, and they're going through, and the crowd is blocked, and Rhaenys now has been split up with Eric. And now all of a sudden the guards are, after the wagon goes by, the guards start ushering everyone. And you realize that they're taking him to the big dragon, above the dragon pit, the big arena, which is the largest place that you can house all these people. You can get them in. It's basically essentially an arena, which is, basically the inauguration. This is where they're going to make Aegon king. Now, again, this is another place that vaguely might look familiar to people that are the casual watcher, because this is the place that when Daenerys finally gets to King's Landing and they have their big council meeting in that pit that is completely destroyed,
Mhm.
this is it. They're there. They're, of course, everything, the Colosseum area of it is kind of busted, and there's no dragons in the pit at that point. But all the people start getting ushered in. Once they get in, Otto basically starts this commencement speech, announces to the city that their beloved king is dead. But they say it's also the most joyous day because as his spirit left us, he has decided that Aegon will be king. And at first you're kind of like, ooh, these people aren't going to like it. But you got to remember that it's very sexist, like you said earlier, as we talked about this. So the crowd, the people are happy. They're getting another male king. I think that they're happy because it's male. I don't think that they're happy because they think he's going to be a great king. I think it's just their mind is so warped to being that it can't be. There's no way they were going to follow a female. So obviously, I think that's the only reason they're happy. Of course, the King Guard walks through. They do their whole halting thing. You've got the trumpets. And finally, you see Aegon dressed out completely in black. He starts this walk through the King's Guard very ceremoniously. He gets up to the kind of the throne area that they're setting up here above the dragon pit, and Otto's kind of announcing everything. The new king, yada, yada, yada. He's putting all this, and he goes up the stairs. Now, Jason, do you feel like Aegon is changing here as he's seeing this? Do you get a sense that he's starting to evolve a little bit?
Yeah, and I think it started with the dagger, and then it just kind of and then as he's walking through, he seemed to like he hated it all, right? He had that look on his face like, no, this ain't for me. But then when the crowd started getting into it and you could tell they were supporting this whole thing, I think that's immediately, and I think it was that, and then his family was up there, right? And he's crowned, and they're nodding their heads, and you could tell that they're anointing him or whatnot. That's when the whole thing changed. He felt it. He absolutely he felt the power, I believe.
The power.
If you want to say that, yeah. He feels the power of the family and all the members bowing to him, yeah.
I mean, as part of his reason for not wanting to be king, I mean, he for 20 years, his father never said he would be the heir. So he just kind of had this woe is me, this pity me, I'm nothing. And now all of a sudden you've got all of King's Landing chanting your name,
Yep.
and he's got the sword, and he's waving everything. Now, in the middle of all this, you see Rhaenys, Princess Rhaenys, she disappears, and she goes down below, and you've got to assume at this point she's. I kind of assume, okay, she's going down to the dragon pit. She's going to get her dragon. She's going to fly away, right? Like, she's going to get away. She's going to be able to go talk to Rhaenyra. And of course, they cut back up to Aegon. And all I could think was laughing because they put this, they do the thumb across the forehead. And I was like, oh, it's
Right.
Simba.
Simba, yeah.
Yeah, I immediately thought Lion King. But of course, this, they do their little oath that they say, and they put the crown on his head, and he kind of looks at his whole family, like you said. And then the crowd goes crazy. He's pumping the sword into the air, and like you said, you feel this power. Now I'm gonna let you kind of bring us home, because this is where this episode just, to me, this solidified where I think this is the best episode of the season so far. Walk us through kind of what happens in these last moments here.
So yeah, obviously he's standing there and he's feeling it, right? I mean, you could tell he just changed. He's feeling it. He's pumping it into the air, whatnot, and he loves the attention. That's what I got. Like all the attention's on me for a change.
Absolutely, yeah.
I don't have older sister, younger siblings, whatever, to take all the attention away. This is my time. And then all of a sudden, you've seen this, essentially an explosion. Obviously, it wasn't fire like that, but it was just a bubble of just bricks and debris or whatever flying everywhere. And obviously, a dragon comes up out of the floor. And that's when it clicked immediately. Oh, she went and got her red dragon to grab the party. And I think, obviously lots of people probably died, crushed by rocks, probably hit by the dragon.
That's all. I was like, how many people did she just kill coming up to that floor? And then on top of it, I immediately thought, I go, oh, there's another future thing that Helena sensed, because she talked about a beast was beneath the floor, and this was that moment. So what happens at this point? Because I listen, bro, I'm on the edge of my seat at this point. I'm sitting up. I was kind of getting tired. I'm sitting up. I was pumped. I was like, okay, we're gonna, because I haven't read all the books. I don't know everything that supposedly happens in the books. I don't know the end game for everybody. So I'm like, man, Rhaenys is about to mess everybody up. So what do we got from here?
So the dragon, obviously, again, it blasted up through there, and then you see kind of the outline or whatever. And originally, like for a split second, I thought Rhaenyra for just a split second, and then I'm like, oh, wait a minute, that's Rhaenys. She's going home.
Yeah.
But she wanted to make a grand exit, right? So she made a grand entrance, and then she made a grand exit. But she popped up, and then the dragon kind of leans way in. And the queen kind of steps in front of her son, obviously. And when it drew its breath, I thought, oh, is this it? Like, she's really going to cook the whole. She's really going to cook the whole family.
I knew that Ender had texted me, so I knew that he had just finished the episode. So he was ahead of me, so I knew he was done. And as Rhaenys is sitting on top of this dragon, I'm literally texting him in all caps, Dracarys, she's going to do it. Yep. She's going to burn this whole damn family. Like, she's going to end it. And then, like you said, this dragon takes this deep breath, opens its mouth, and what happens here?
And obviously, Alicent kind of closed her eyes, right? She's like, oh, here we go. Time to burn. She was standing in front of her son, and it seemed like to me she was just, all right, whatever happened, I can't survive. I'm ready to die. But instead, the dragon just kind of gave him like a side-eye, dirty look, and
he does this big growl, no fire.
Yeah, right. And so obviously, so did Rhaenys, and with no fire, obviously, and she could have smoked them all to send a message, but I think she was just kind of flaunting her power at that point, like, hey. In this particular moment, I am in charge. And then you kind of see, they kind of pan from, to the outside, and you see Rhaenys and her dragon jumping out of the building and kind of flying away, and then fade to black, essentially.
Yeah, that's it. You gotta imagine she's flying to Dragonstone.
Right.
I would guess to go talk to Damon and Rhaenyra, but I was just my heart was pounding, the blood was boiling, and I was so ready for this just like epic Dracarys moment where, and then it just didn't happen. I've never been so deflated, but obviously it wasn't in the cards there. But I'm just thinking, man, there's so many times that when you look back at Game of Thrones, I'm like, if the person would have just done this, if they would have done A instead of B, we wouldn't be in this situation that we are in. Like this whole thing started because the king didn't marry Lyanna. If he
Right.
would have taken Lyanna from the beginning, I know she was like 8 years old, but but we wouldn't be in any of this situation. None of this happens.
Oh,
It's mind-boggling, and this is another thing. You got to imagine there's just going to be this big battle between Rhaenyra and Daemon and the High Towers, and Rhaenys had this opportunity to wipe them all out right there.
yeah.
So I'm interested to see where it goes. So that kind of brings us, obviously, that brings us to the end. Like you said, we fade to black there. Uh, so that's the end of the episode. I'm excited to see where it goes. We've got the finale next Sunday night. So we will get out our next episode for you guys either Monday morning or Tuesday morning. Jason and I will record that final episode and bring you guys home here. But just want to say thank you guys for listening. We're still up on some of the top rankings on Apple Podcast and Spotify, so we appreciate everyone listening here. Don't forget, if you are watching this on YouTube, for whatever reason, you can find the audio versions on Spotify or Apple Podcast or wherever you get your podcast platforms. Of course, we are Last Choice TV Reviews, House of the Dragon. And if you're listening to the audio version, you can look us up on Last Choice Network on YouTube or just kind of put in Last Choice TV Reviews, House of the Dragon. You'll be able to find the video version of that there. With that being said, my name is James III. You can find me on all social media platforms there. Of course, I do stream on Facebook Gaming as well. And then we have Jason here at Fire the Cannon. Jason, one more time, I'm going to let you kind of close it out here on where people can find you besides this. And maybe if you want to let some of the audience know a little bit more about the sports podcast and what your plans are going forward with it.
Yeah. So obviously it's at 614 and beyond. That's the podcast, the 614 and Beyond pod. We big hockey guy, obviously Blue Jackets, but we'd like to talk about as much as we can. Obviously with the Cleveland Guardians in the playoffs, kind of haven't really touched on them a lot, but I'm rooting for them.
Mm-hmm.
But our plan is to just keep going, talking about the hockey season. Probably gonna here in the next couple of days. Got a game tomorrow, so probably Wednesday. Just kind of do a brief catch up on the first 4 or 5 games of the season. Also with the Ohio State Buckeye football team. That's my first love, really.
Oh, same here. Yep. OH.
Yeah, that's right. So yeah, I did a quarter, or I guess a third season kind of breakdown, just go over some stats, stuff like that. So that's kind of where we're at. I'm working on some things with a few companies to maybe get some sponsorships and stuff like that.
Nice.
I work with a brewery who created our own beer for our fan group with the Blue Jackets, which sold out opening night, by the way.
Hey, congratulations. And you still never answer me how I get that delivered here in Texas.
Well, wait. Okay, so 2 things. One, you're not the only one that's asked about Texas. We actually have a former professional baseball player that is from the Columbus area that is a big fan of the Blue Jackets, and he wants some too. So I'm going to talk to Endeavor Brewing. That's who made the beer for us, and see what we can do about.
Now, does that former baseball player live in the Dallas area?
He does, yeah.
See, so what you should do, ship it all to me, and then I'll drive it out to them, hand deliver on behalf of the 614 pod.
Yeah, he would probably he'd probably be down for it, but I'm not sure how the whole shipping of beer and stuff like that works. So I want to get with Endeavor first and talk to them,
absolutely.
and maybe we just ship it straight out from them. But yeah, we're also working with a local pizza place here who is, they're throwing pizza parties for us, the Blue Jacket fans, and doing some cool stuff there. So we're I got some stuff going on, so I hope I'll probably talk about it more in the pods and stuff like that. So I'll be trying to put out a few here in the next week or so, and you guys check it out. 614 and Beyond. I am on Fire the Cannon on Twitter. It's F1RE the Cannon, and there you go.
Well, Jason, we appreciate it at Fire the Cannon. You have been awesome. I look forward to recording with you next week as well as we watch the season finale. And for everyone else, thank you guys for listening and stopping by and watching us on YouTube. And until next week, have a good night.